Hi everyone, I'm Oanh Nhi Nguyen. I'm the director and co-writer of Little Bird and The Stand.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the logistics of these two projects because the interesting idea of this is that these locations are not easy to shoot at, right?
Yeah.
Because you have no control over the environment and everything like that. So talk a little bit about the pre-planning for these to get these shorts done in these environments and the challenges you had in controlling the environment you were in.
Yeah, I mean, definitely locations was huge for both of these films in different ways. I'll talk a little about Little Bird first. So Little Bird was my thesis film at AFI. So I graduated there in 2024. So we have like this whole process of development and production at AFI. So I had a lot of time to think through details for Little Bird, but it's also a period piece in the 80s. And it was inspired by like real life events that happened in Philly to Southeast Asian refugees who were resettled in really dilapidated apartment buildings. So imagine like we had to find those kinds of locations that felt real, that was really, honored what happened to people, the way that they were resettled. So that was pretty insane because the outside shot was an abandoned building. It was like there was like a fire there like a week before we filmed. Nobody lives in it. It's a cul-de-sac, thankfully, which is why I made it easy for us to film because then we need to pay for, a cop and
Yeah.
like all that stuff, which we couldn't afford. We were short. So the apartment building in Little Bear is obviously like a character in itself. But that building and that apartment was actually 3 locations. So we had the outside of the apartment, which is like an abandoned building. And then we had the hallway scenes, which was actually real residents lived there. And that was also a bit of a nightmare. And so my production designer, Bala, the graffiti on the wall was all fake, but we also had to be respectful of the people who actually live there.
Sure.
And then the apartment itself was actually another location. It was an old church, but right on Skid Row actually, but it was it's like gated and stuff. And the apartment was bare. It was like white and gray when we got there, and Bala like built it out so beautifully to make it feel really lived in. So that's Little Bird. The Stand also has challenges, and it's part of the Rising Voices program with Filmmaker and Indeed. So technically, I had really like a month to prep, really, versus Little Bird has 6 months to prep. So finding the locations for the Stand was very difficult because of sound, but also safety, just to make sure it was like a safe environment for the kids and our crew at night, especially. And it wasn't until like the last week we found our studio in I think Cypress Park, and we were really struggling with finding the location, negotiating with some business owners, but then wouldn't have control of like this whole street with other businesses.
Yeah.
So in the end, she's just like, why don't we just park right here? Like right here. We own this lot as part of the studio because the bar and the Stand is actually where we were housing our crew and cast. So it really turned out to be, it was like last minute, it really worked out.
Yeah, happy accidents, right? That's just the beauty of filmmaking sometimes.
Yeah.
The other thing about the Stand especially, I mean, you do a lot of this in Little Bird too, but in the Stand especially, there's a lot of movement around the Stand itself. So having it on that corner, I had to imagine was a blessing as well, because then you could kind of go around and kind of film in different angles and different spots around the Stand.
Yes, and as like production happens, things happen, and you're like, oh, we can't shoot that way. So we actually had real food vendors standing on the other side, and they didn't want the camera. So we had to like, for just like one scene or 2 scenes, it was like a half a day. So we had to change our shots for that. And just respect that they don't want to be on camera. So yes, technically we did have a lot of access, like where to shoot, but then, production happens and you can't shoot one way for some reason, but we figure it out.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, that's again, independent film, right? You figure it out on the fly and you kind of work around it. These films come at an interesting time in our political history, in our world right now. And these are very important topics to you personally. how much of what you're trying to do is a statement as versus, you know, entertainment?
I mean, I think in everything that I do, it's important to have a message or a meaning behind. And I think, you know, I'm a Vietnamese immigrant. My parents are, you know, refugees and also immigrants. And I think these stories, I made them to really center like Southeast Asian women and girls, specifically girls, because I don't think there's a lot of narratives about us that really truly talks about what we've been through or the struggles, but also the responsibilities young girls face, especially young women and girls face. So that's always like the messaging behind what I strive to do, and to amplify a narrative that's not a dominant narrative. For me, it's important to have a message or a purpose of why I'm doing something, because making films is hard, and to having something to drive me to like want to take it to the completion. I also do think, though, it's important to have high quality films. So it's like, how do you balance both of having a good message and a good story? Because it is true, films are about entertaining people. So I think both, if you're able, but hopefully everything you're trying to make does say something behind it.
Especially in the short medium where you only have a limited amount of time to kind of tell the story, right? So,
yeah, 100%.
What you know, you're breaking all the rules here. You're shooting outdoors. You're shooting in uncontrolled environments. You're shooting with kids. Talk a little bit about putting these young girls front and center and what they gave to the roles that you didn't expect them to give.
Yeah, I mean, especially, I'm very protective of kid actors, and especially girl actors. I think it's like such a vulnerable place to be in. I mean, acting is so vulnerable to begin with, but to be young and to do it is even another level, and there's a lot of dynamics there. So I kind of really approach this about my actors, but specifically with these young actors, is to let them know that like this is a collaboration. Like, you know, they are the ones putting themselves out there, and I want to hear how they suggest a character would do, what they would do, what they would say. So I kind of like to keep it flexible with them. So on the stand, Joe V and Kai were improvising some of the scenes. Like Kai doesn't have an older sister, and he, you know, did a good job being the annoying little brother. So, but it's like figuring out the chemistry between them.
Yeah.
And then even in the audition, they did so well together. And it's really creating space for them to take a chance and risk without being scared to fail. I think I push them hard in a way that's like not like strict or authoritative, but like I give them the space to explore, but really go deeper. And I know when they can go deeper. So it's really about creating that rapport with them. So in Little Bird, Jolie, she's 10. This is first time acting, actually. And so I really had to build rapport with her earlier on, because she's a child model and she's never acted before. I discovered her on Instagram. And I had to, you know, set up play dates for her aunt and even Chantal, the main actress, to get to know each other. And then she had a blast on set because like she was comfortable enough to like try things or be herself, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I take it very seriously, and I just strive to make that space for them as much as I can, so that they know that they can play and it should be fun, you know?
And then when the older actors you come in and anchor, especially in Little Bird, it's more important. How much freedom do you give them?
I mean, here's the thing. When you write a script and you have a dialogue and you're like, something's not working here, you know, like I don't force actors to say it exactly the way it's written unless it's like so important to the story. So in rehearsal, I try to find that with them, and I let them tell me if something feels right or wrong, and I can see it, you know. If they're like saying and stumbling over it, or I'm actually very open in the way that I understand this is a collaboration and I trust my actors, right? I try to pick the best one for the role and the character, because I know they can bring something more that I can't, right? I like to keep it very collaborative, but I also keep in mind, obviously, like the story and the character. Like, so as long as it fits in that arc, it's fine with me. Because these two films, I want them to make them feel really real and natural. And so it's important for me that the the dialogue and the movement, the blocking felt natural to people. Me, less rapport building, and like not less, but like, kids is a bit different, building a relationship with them versus an adult.
Along those lines, were you kind of trying to use as much natural light as possible to kind of give it that real feel, or did you guys try to artificially light that a little bit more?
The stand's basically all natural. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Little Bird, we tried to be as natural as possible, mm-hmm. but we definitely had some lighting set up that Timmy Shin, awesome cinematographer, Ed Wu for the stand. Very lucky to work with both of them. But yeah, the very different visual styles for both.
I'm curious for you, because the one was a thesis for you, but also doing short films. Do you feel like you're finding your footing with those? Are you appreciative of what short films are doing for you as a filmmaker, or do you feel like you want to graduate to features, but or do you feel like you're a short film filmmaker? I mean, where do you stand as far as the short film medium goes and what it's given to you?
Yeah, I was actually reflecting on this earlier. I've done 10 shorts now, 4 doc shorts and 6 narrative shorts. And I obviously give a lot of credit to AFI for making me do 4 in 2 years, which is crazy. Yeah. But I think the more shorts that I made, the better I got at directing.
Of course.
So I see it as like practice. Like Little Bird and the stand visually are very different, and I wanted to try something different with the stand. But now I'm like, moving forward, like what do I really like to do visually? And I'm glad I tried both, because now I'm like more clear like what I want to do for the next one. I mean, I'm working on my feature, so like I do want to do my feature next year, and potentially a pilot, who knows? But I think I'm done with shorts for now. But I think they're really great practice to figure out your voice, to get better as a filmmaker. My earlier stuff, nobody will see that, because that was what I didn't know what I was doing. And that's fine, because that's part of the process of finding out what to do. I really didn't know what directing was until I just intuitively felt like I would be good at it and I wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I was literally figuring it out for my docuseries, taking root, and then the short that I made to get into AFI. So I really highly recommend it to first-time directors or emerging directors, because that's the only way you can learn, by doing. Mm-hmm. And even at AFI, we had to do like little scenes. We film on iPhone, iPads. Mm-hmm. I could see my improvement just from that too. So it doesn't matter if it's like a big budget or small budget or whatever. Just do a scene and try it out. And I think it's always worth it to practice the directing muscle with shorts.
At AFI, do they do the same approach that some film schools do, in terms of you're working together with the class you're with, and you're working on each other's projects, or are you guys kind of separated and doing your own projects?
So I think AFI might be slightly different, that there's like disciplines. So there's directing discipline, editing, cinematography, production designer, producing. And then we have to pitch whichever, they're called cycle films, these practice films the first year. There's 3 in the first year. And directors pitch their idea first, the first cycle film, and then producers try to partner with you, and then we hire the team. Mm-hmm. So like, it's kind of cool that, you find your crew in the conservatory, and then you work towards it, and you only have, my first cycle film, I have 4 weeks to write it and to shoot it. And then like a week to edit it. And then I have to show it to the whole class and get, really heavily critiqued too, which was awful. But yeah, so it's like, it really got you trained up to do it, to learn what to do, how to do it. And yeah, I thought it was a great process, even as it was very girly, I'm not gonna lie. But I definitely grew as a filmmaker because of it.
What made you choose these films to put out there? Was it just a matter of the message? Did you feel like you nailed something pretty good here? What made you decide that it was time to put some stuff out there for yourself?
Yeah, so Little Bird was inspired by my documentary series, Taking Root. Mm-hmm. Taking Root is about Southeast Asian resettlement stories in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And in that series, we meet a Chinese organizer named Debbie Wei. And we really uncovered with community leaders who are Southeast Asians how it was like to grow up in Philadelphia after the war in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia. And it was just awful. Like, they were literally resettled in apartment buildings that Black communities had protested, and they got kicked out. And then they boarded it up, and then the refugees came and they just literally put them in there. So I have pictures that you see in the end of Little Bird, like kids playing outside of concrete and dirt and litter. And so that really inspired Little Bird, because I wanted to show folks like the other end of the story, like side of the story after the war, like what happened to us.
Yeah.
Not all of us were resettled in like with help or any support. Actually, in Philadelphia, there was like no support, which I'm sure is common in other cities in the U.S. After the war. So that was an idea I had for a long time. Maybe like a year, and my first year at AFI thinking about it, and thesis, I decided to do Little Bird for that. There were so many iterations of it though, but
yeah,
that's what we came out with. And then the stand, it was it's a Rising Voices program, so we have to respond to a prompt and it's sponsored by Indeed. So it's like, what does the future of work mean to us? Mm-hmm. And it was a bit also inspired by my docuseries, because there's an episode of my doc where Southeast Asian refugees began selling food in Philly in the 80s and 90s. And they have a thriving food market in Philly. And I always saw like it's a family work, right? Like young kids helping their parents out, young girls helping their parents out. And then moving to LA and then driving through the cities of LA and seeing kids helping out their parents at their stand. But also seeing this young boy and this sibling late at night with their parents, like, pulling a cart, going home, and he had a Nerf gun. So just like took a kind of inspiration from a bit of that. And I just wanted to say that the future of work will still impact immigrant communities as we're seeing now. And especially working class communities, and to not forget the young girls who are also holding it down for their families right now.
And you presented these to Hollyshorts. What made you decide to do Hollyshorts this year?
So they're both made in LA.
Mm-hmm.
The stand, we got a block with Hollyshorts through Rising Voices. And then Little Bird, I just, made it in LA, so wanted to submit it. That way hopefully my crew and cast come see it too, since it's local.
Nice. Yeah. What is it about independent film? What do you love about making independent film?
I think it's like the ability to adapt to any challenges. And I think in the moment it feels impossible if they have so many hurdles, which we did have for both of these films. But in the end, you just got to trust the process and just know you'll figure it out. Like the fact that we found the stand location like a week out after trying to look for it for a month, and having a really, really hard time, it just works out, and I think that's part of the meditation of being an indie filmmaker is to be comfortable with that, with challenges and obstacles. So I would say that it's actually one of my favorite parts, because it does kind of challenge you in all ways, like mentally, spiritually, physically, and forces you to be creative.